Hello chess friends and welcome to Chesslovers channel. So far I have recommended to you 20 chess books, and in this clip I will once again tell you these books, and in my hand you can see my first selection, which is My System, written by Nimzowitsch. And the reason I'm recommending this book as clearly number one choice because he's the only world-class player who has really revealed his secrets how to win games. He's dealing with prophylaxis, he's dealing with restraint, he's dealing with overprotection, maneuvering against weaknesses, and so on and so forth. However, he has written another book which is behind this one, published on the same company, Quality Chess, Chess Praxis. And I know that many of you prefer algebraic notation, which you have in this book. So they are clearly number one choice, especially My System. My second choice is also a book written in algebraic notation, and it's Manual of Chess, written by Lasker. So here you can also say that Lasker reveals a lot of his chess understanding connected to Stein's chess theories, the classical chess, and that he has also complemented Lasker's theories with his own theories. It's especially chapter 4 in this book, which is so outstanding. He has written another book, Common Sense in Chess, and this is a more light book. So I would say this is more a book for beginners and club players, while this is for very good club players and elite players. So clearly number two choice. Number three choice of mine is Modern Ideas in Chess by Réti. And if Nimzowitsch discusses his prophylactic theories as a reaction against Stein's theories that was discussed by Lasker in his book, this book is concentrated on the development. And also the book behind Masters of the Chessboard is a book written by him in the same tradition. So what he is doing, he is discussing the strategical chess ideas from around Adolf Anderssen to Alexander Alekhine. Clearly number three choice, according to my opinion. And what is my fourth choice then? A complete middle game book. The middle game and the middle game, because he has two books. Book 1 dealing with static features, and book 2 dealing with dynamic and subjective features. So this is the most complete endgame book that I am aware of, because it's dealing with all aspects of the game. So you should definitely try to read such an outstanding work written by the great chess teacher Max Euwe. If you for some reason do not have access to these books in the English language or the German language, Das Mittelspiel in Schach, you can compensate it by reading the books by Pachman, Complete Chess Strategy. Unfortunately, I don't have the front page of this book because I have read it too much. There is an abbreviation, you might call, of Complete Chess Strategy called Modern Chess Strategy, written by the same author. So these books are not the same, but some games are different, and of course it's much more abbreviated form. So if you read this book, I hope you will read the books by Euwe, because you need to read middle game books to get a really good knowledge of the middle game, the technical aspects and the strategy. My number 6 choice is a much more advanced book, Secrets of Chess Training, written by Mark Dvoretsky and with a foreword by Gary Kasparov. So this is the most advanced book I have recommended so far. And this book is best for players on at least FIDE master level, I would say, 2300 ELO level, because this is a book for players who aspires to become international masters or even international grandmasters. So then you should definitely absorb such a book, and you can also absorb a sister book, so to speak, Secrets of Chess Tactics. I have assimilated both of these books very thoroughly, and these books has given me so much thanks to Dvoretsky's insights in effective positions in chess training, especially how to calculate and how to improve with your weaknesses connected to calculation. So really outstanding but very advanced books. You should not read them too early, because the earlier you read them, the more challenging them will be, and it's even challenging on FM and IM level, I can tell you. My next recommendation is Capablanca's Chess Fundamentals, and as the title says, it's a book about fundamentals, but in Capablanca's own way. This is a book recommended by Botvinnik, so it is a really good book indeed. But there are some books behind here, and we have a primer to chess as well as my chess career. So I recommend all these three books, but this is number one choice. However, be aware of the fact that I don't know any edition written in descriptive notation, algebraic notation. You have to deal with descriptive notation in this book, which covers all three main works by Capablanca. I hope you can deal with descriptive notation, because, as I have said before in another clip, it will help you to slow down your learning and increase your objectivity, because you must think both for white and for black. My eighth choice is The Middle Game in Chess by the great writer Euwe Znosko-Borovsky. And this book deals with topics like time, force, and space, and how to evaluate a position. There is another book about combinations written by him I can also recommend. But for now, I will recommend this book, How Not to Play Chess. So here he's also dealing with how you can analyze a position, subjective analysis, mechanic analysis, dynamic analysis. So both of these books are very good. As you can see, I have read it a lot. Those of you who don't like descriptive notation, you have to stand it if you read these books. But these books are so good that it will compensate. So I really hope you will learn to deal with descriptive notation, because there are so many good books. My ninth selection is this book by Glenn Flear, Practical Endgame Play Beyond the Basics. This is one of the few books covered with a very important multi-piece endgame positions. For example, Queen and Rook against Queen and Rook. Is it an endgame or a middle game? I don't know. Strictly speaking, it might be called a middle game, and that is why this book can be a part in this series, which is mainly focused on middle game books. Glenn Flear has written some other good books, but I'm going to recommend another book in this genre, and it's this book, Mastering Complex Endgames, written by the great trainer Adrian Mikhaisin and Oleg Stetsko. So here you can also read about the endgame Queen Rook and Queen Rook, and of course other multi-piece endings. Such books are rare, so if you are equipped with this book, because it contains a lot of statistics, which is also very important to know, you have a great edge against 99% of all your opponents. I can assure you that this is a real gem. My 10th last choice of 10 best books is Bronstein's Neuheitsgeschichte 1953, this famous, maybe the most famous candidate tournament in the whole of the chess history, because this was a very interesting time regarding chess development. And of course this is a good complement to the books by Réti I recommended before, because here you will actually learn how chess was played during the 50s with openings such as King's Indian and the Sicilian defense. But the main topic I would say is that what is weakness, and if you should simplify it, you can say that a weakness is a weakness that can be effectively attacked. So in this book we are, for example, dealing with this D6 weakness, which can arise in the Boleslavsky variation in the Sicilian defense or the King's Indian defense. So the most important, it is a tournament book, but I would nevertheless call it a middle game book. This tournament book is an exception to the rule due to Bronstein's great annotations. You can read another book in the same genre, it's even the same tournament, written by Najdorf, because I think it's good, it's useful to compare how does Bronstein annotate a game, and then you check how Najdorf annotates it, or vice versa. You should have both books. That is the key, I think. So as you could see here, what I have told you so far is what I believe are the 10 most profitable books to read for a chess player who aspires to become a better chess player, but above all to understand chess more thoroughly, especially middle game. And I have also shown you that there is always a book behind a book. So, for example, behind Secrets of Chess Training was Secrets of Chess Tactics. And that is what I believe, that if you have found one good chess book of one author, normally you can read the other books by the same author as well. Or if we are dealing with an unusual genre, like for example multi-piece endings or special tournaments where there have been written more than one book, you can read all books in the same genre. And when we are dealing with multi-piece endings, I think this is very important, because multi-piece endings are neglected in basic endgame books. And chess is about understanding more than your opponent, and such books can help you a lot. Now we will go on to my 11th selections, which is also connected to the endgame strategy, because what you're learning here you can also use in the middle game, as the title says, is strategy. For example, how to maneuver against two weaknesses, but it's also dealing with a lot of other topics like isolated deepen, how to play with the bishop pair, and so on and so forth. This is a great writer, Shereshevsky. He has written several books that I have read, but the books coming closest to this one are of course these two, Mastering the Endgame Volume 1, open and semi-open games, and Volume 2, closed games. So if you want to specialize on a special type of play in the tradition of Tartakower, these books are excellent and good complement to endgame strategy. But endgame strategy is clearly number one choice. My 11th choice is Hans Kmoch's Pawn Power in Chess. This book was published in 1959. I have another edition, a German edition from 1956, Die Kunst der Beinführung. And this book is probably better than this one, slightly better, because it's more detailed and longer. But according to Kmoch, in the American edition, he says that these books are different. So if you don't have access to the German edition, of course you read this one. Such a book is completely unique because it's dealing with pawn formations. And what is a pawn formation? First, we must discuss what is a pawn structure. A pawn structure can be, for example, the Karlsbad structure, which arises in the Queen's Gambit defense after d4, d5, c4, e6, c takes d5, e takes d5. And in such a Karlsbad structure, often a minority attack will arise. Rook b1, b4 to b5, b takes c6, and black recaptures b takes c6 and gets a backward and isolated pawn on the c file. So then we are dealing with a structure because it happens in the opening and it affects the middle game and even the end game. For example, rook endings with the backward c6 pawn is very important to study. I mean, they can be drawn, but you can win with perfect technique if the opponent is not equipped with the same level of technique. So when we are dealing with a pawn formation, we are mainly dealing with, it could be a defensive formation, for example. I will show you on a chessboard to make it clearer. And here you can see a position which I saw myself yesterday because I watched a clip by Felix Bluberger, the Austrian grandmaster, because he's talking about rook endgames. And as you can see here, black has a pawn formation with pawns on f7, g6, and h5. That is a pawn formation, a defensive pawn formation, and normally regarded as the best formation to have when you are pawn down in a rook ending, especially if white's d pawn is located on the e file. But now the white has an extra pass pawn on the d file, and according to Bluberger, he says that black's best defensive pawn formation is to play f6, because then black covers the squares g5 and e5, so white's king cannot enter, but it also prevents rook e5 check followed by rook e3, because then the king could maneuver to e4 and d5, and in front of the d pawn white would have serious winning chances. So f6 is a very important move to make here. And okay, the g6 pawn is weakened, but if white manages to win the pawn on g6 in exchange for the d pawn, the position would nevertheless be a draw. So I hope you understand now the meaning of pawn structure, which happens in the opening, and pawn formations, which can happen at any time, but it's mainly defensive. Or you can also see here that white has the same pawn formation with pawns on f3, g3, h4. So for white, it's mainly offensive. Anyway, you should understand the difference between pawn structure and pawn formation. My 13th selection is The Soviet School of Chess, written by Kutov and Nimzowitsch. And the book behind has almost the same title, The Soviet Chess School, written by the same authors. And the reason I'm recommending this book is because it's a good follow-up to Bronstein's Neuer Zürich 1953. But here, and it's also a good, parallel to Réti's books, but here the focus is, of course, on Soviet and Russian players. And here, Shigurin is the great name, according to the Russian tradition, while Steines is a great name according to the classical tradition. So such books are necessary to understand Russian and Soviet, the development of Russian and Soviet chess, because they have been so influential. My 14th suggestion is the ideas behind the chess openings, written by Rubin Fine. So here he's dealing with the ideas and pawn structures. So such a book you should read relatively early in your career, so you understand the basic chess principles in the opening. And there are some other books in the same tradition, but for me this is clearly #1 choice. And Rubin Fine is a really great author, so I would prefer to recommend other books by Rubin Fine, like for example The Middle Game in Chess, which we haven't talked so much about before, where he's, for example, talking about imbalances in chess. So this is a book you should have in your bookshelf and study from time to time and really assimilate, because it will follow you in your whole chess life. Next choice by me is The Art of the Middle Game, written by Paul Keres and Alexander Kutov. And the Swedish edition looks like this. This was actually the first book I came in contact with as a chess player, and it's not a beginner's book, but if you have reached a certain level, you should definitely read it. And the chapters by Kutov are easier to digest because it's dealing with fundamental structures in the middle of the board, fundamental pawn structures. And he's also dealing with how to attack the king, whether it has castled or not. While Keres is dealing with much more complicated themes, like how to defend in difficult positions and how to analyze adjourned positions. Really great book. I would like very much to recommend a book by Keres, which is called Power Chess. Keres was a great annotator, but this book was co-authored together with Kutov, and another book by Kutov was co-authored with Nimzowitsch. Later on, I will talk more about Kutov, but for now I will recommend this book by Keres because of his great annotations. For example, his game Keres Westerinen Tallinn 1971 is a great game to study, both the game and his annotations. My further selections has been this book. Unfortunately, I have no front page here as well because of reading too much. And this book, Chess Tactics for Advanced Players, Sportverlag Berlin, 1984, written by Euwe Averbakh, is a unique book because he has a unique perspective how to deal with tactics, because for him tactics essentially is a double threat. And I believe he is right. I have written an article about this in one of the Swedish chess magazines. So you should really focus on that book. There are new editions now, I have seen. Okay, we continue with my next selection, which is Chess Middle Game Planning by Peter Romanovsky. And here I can also recommend a newer edition published on Quality Chess, Soviet Middle Game Technique, where you can also read about combinations. So those books are excellent reading. I have also recommended a dictionary, the Oxford Companion to Chess, but obviously such a book you can read at any time in your chess career. But this book is unique because you can also read a lot about players, small biographies, but quite long. You can read about concepts, playing styles, ideas, and so on. And most dictionaries are not so detailed as this one. This edition is from 1996, but I can also recommend this edition from 1987. It doesn't really matter which edition you have, to be honest, but you should have one of these. Yeah, I have also recommended Psychology in Chess, written by Nikolai Krogius, and he has written some other good books, but mainly in the Russian language. But there are some other psychology books I can recommend. For example, this one, written by Simon Webb, Chess for Tigers. This is a really good book, especially for young players. This was my first book about chess psychology that I was recommended because it has been translated into Swedish. Another psychology book is this one, The Psychology of Chess, written by the English player Hartstone, as well as P.C. Wason. Okay. My last recommendation in this recommendation of 20 books was this book, The Hypermodern Game of Chess, written by Tartakower. And the main thing I learned from this book is that anything can be a weakness. If we learned from Bronstein's Neuhauser-Zurich 53 that a pawn on this is not necessarily a weakness, it's only a weakness if it can be effectively attacked. We learn from this book that anything can be a weakness. I mean, not only a pawn, but sometimes a piece, and sometimes the position. So this book is very good complement when you are reading the hypermodern writers such as Réti and Nimzowitsch. Tartakower certainly belongs to them. And there are other books, but they are not translated into English, and that is a pity because this book, Moderne Schachstrategie, was published 1930, while this was published 1924. So we are still waiting for translations of great classics. So now I have recommended to you 20 books, but I also need to tell you what I believe is the correct chronological order to read these books, and then I have classified these books into different groups. In my secret notebook, I have written the following order of my recommended 20 chess books according to a progression, because chess should be a little difficult if you should be able to profit the most of it. It should not be too difficult, like for example Secrets of Chess Training if you're not on the level, or my system part 2 if you're not on the level. And it should not be too easy. That is not good either. So what you should strive for in your chess training is slight difficulties. And I have done the progression, and then my first suggestion is to read Ideas Behind the Chess Openings by Ruben Fine, so you get a hold of the important opening principles, development and the center, and he also discusses the ideas with the chess openings. And you can continue with Capablanca's Chess Fundamentals, where he also discusses middle game and end game. And you can also read My System by Aaron Nimzowitsch if you concentrate on the first part. The first part contains the following chapters: the center and development, the open file, the 7th and 8th ranks, and this is also very good to focus on the 7th and 8th ranks, because on higher level you focus on the 6th and 5th ranks. The pass pawn, exchanging, the elements of endgame strategy, the pinned piece, discovered check. He also has a chapter in the first part of the book called the pawn chain, and maybe you should wait with it because it's more advanced strategy to discuss the pawn chain. So you could do the 8 first chapters in my system. So these books can be regarded as the first group for beginners and club players. Of course, you must know how the pieces are functioning, the main functions of the piece, what it can do, what it cannot do. The second group can be a book by Znosko-Borovsky, The Middle Game in Chess. So you learn the middle game in a basic perspective, time, force, and space. And then you can continue with one of the books by Pachman, for example, Modern Chess Strategy, or the best of all would be if you could assimilate all these books. Now we are already on, I would say, 1900, 2000 level, dealing with such books. And you can also do Static Features, which is the first book of Euwe about the middle game. So you are essentially learning classical theories by focusing on what is static in chess. I also recommend this book in the second group, The Art of the Middle Game, so you can learn fundamental pawn structures in the center and how to attack the king. So you should probably wait a little with the chapters by Paul Keres, because it's higher level. And you can also read this book by Peter Romanovsky, because it's dealing with planning. And I also recommend this book, Endgame Strategy, because what you can read here you can also use in the middle game. So this is a second group of books. And the third group, I recommend the book by Lasker, which I have put here. And then I mean the part 4 in this book, which is dealing with Steiner's theories. So now we are on higher level, definitely more than 2000. I would say that you can read chapter 4, or you should have read it before you have around 2200. So I would say that if you have around 2100, it can be good to read chapter 4 and try to reach 2200 or even more. I mean, the more you understand, the higher, the better results you will achieve. And after that, you can assimilate the second part of my system and perhaps include pawn chain, which is the first part in this book. So you really learn about prophylactic play, overprotection, and so on. But you should read Manual of Chess before this one, because this is a book which is a reaction to Steiner's theory, which you can read about in book 4 in this book. And after Lasker and Nimzowitsch, I recommend the hypermodern game of chess by Tartakower, which will increase your awareness what weakness might be. So these books are, I would recommend when you are in the third group, at least 2100. But if you assimilate these books, you will climb up the ladder, I can assure you. So then we have the fourth group, and the fourth group, I have put books like, for example, these three. They are all dealing with chess in a historical perspective, beginning with Modern Ideas in Chess from Anderson to Alekhine, and then Bronstein's book, Zurich 1953, dealing with the 50s. And then this is a good complement to Réti's book, because it's solely dealing with the Soviet school of chess, from Chigorin and onwards until the 60s, because this book was published in 1961, while the other book I showed you was published 20 years later. But of course, such books you can read before the books I showed you in group 3, because the books in group 3, you know, Lasker's Manual of Chess, part 4, Nimzowitsch My System, part 2, and Tartakower's Hypermodern Game of Chess are more advanced than these books. So you can read these books together with books in group 2, the middle games I recommended you, like for example the book by Znosko-Borovsky, the book by Pachman, the first book by Euwe, Static Features, and the book by Kutov, especially the chapters by Kutus, The Art of Middle Game, and the book of Romanovsky, Planning, and the book about endgame strategy by Shereshevsky. So you can read them parallelly with the middle game books. So I'm classifying the books into different groups and give you an approximate idea of in which order you could read them to get a good progression. And the fifth group, then I have written that you can read the second part of Euwe's book, dealing with dynamic and subjective features. So we are in the dynamic and psychological area now, a more concrete area, a much higher level. And of course you should complement it with Krogius, Psychology in Chess, to understand all the psychological aspects in the game. And you can also complement with these very highly specialized books about how to deal with tactics according to Averbakh, and that you are aware of all kinds of pawn formations that can arise in your games, not only structures. We are dealing with pawn formations, as we discussed before. So such books are also intended for players on high levels. I mean, at least 2200, I would say. And the last group, I would recommend this book to study multi-piece endings. And then we have Seekers of Chess Training, the most advanced book of all these books. And this one I put last, but essentially this book, which is a dictionary, you can read while you are in group 2, when you are learning middle game books, and group 4, when you are studying the historical ideas through history. So this is my suggestion to a good progression. So I have classified these 20 books in 6 groups, but notice that sometimes the same book can be put in different groups. Like, for example, Nimzowitsch Part 1, I put in the beginner and club players group 1, while I put Nimzowitsch Part 2 in group 3. And also, when we discuss this book by Kutov, the chapters by Keres are more advanced, and we are actually, I would say, in group 5 or even group 6, when we are dealing with how to defend exceptionally difficult positions or to analyze adjourned positions. So what I mean is that Kutov's chapters are very fundamental, and I have put them in group 2, while Keres chapters can be put in group 5 or 6. So if we translate to approximate levels, I would say that group 1 is for beginners who know how the pieces moves, and for club players. And group 2, I have recommended, for example, Znosko-Borovsky's middle game book. And for me, Pachman, the book by Pachman was profitable from around 1900 levels. So I would say we have a jump here So group 1 is beginner and normal club player, while group 2 we are already on good club player level, I would say 1900 level. And you can also read the books I put in group 4, the books by Réti, Bronstein and Nimzowitsch, the book which describes the historical development in chess. So group 2 and 4 are essentially the same group, we might say. And group 3, we are on, I would say, between 2100 to 2200 level, when you are reading the first chapter by Lasker, the second part on Nimzowitsch, including pawn chains, and the book by Tartakower. And then the 5th group, we are already on high level. We are seasoned tournament players. We are definitely at least on 2200 level, let's say 2250, to make a slight distinction. So then you can read about dynamic features in the book by Euwe and about subjective features. You learn more about psychology. You learn other ways to deal with tactics, as Averbakh has suggested, and also that you learn more about pawn formations rather than pawn structures, which is lower level because it's connected to openings, while pawn formations are more concrete depending on positions. And then the last group, multi-piece endings, I would say we are now on at least 2300 level, and secrets of chess training, it might be even 2400 level, let's say from 2300 to 2400 level. So this has been an attempt to suggest to you according to my experiences, because I have read all these books and all these books have benefited me so much. Obviously I have not read them in this order, but since some of you has requested this, according to the comments I have tried to do it, but as you can see, one book often contains several levels, so in a way it's an impossible mission. But anyway, this is a try, and of course there are many missing books, and I will continue this series with books from 21 to 30, because there are some other books. There are writers like Sharon Reinfeldt. There are so many great writers out there who really deserves to be read, and I have read so many books that have benefited me so much. So I want to share with you my experiences. So I hope you continue to join me when I produce more clips and book recommendations. And for now, thank you for watching, and see you then.